Good evening. On behalf of the National Education Association, thank you for joining us tonight. My name is Michelle Hudgens. As your moderator for this evening, I have the honor of introducing our distinguished panel of female educators and leaders as we discuss our roles as educators, girls' pathways to leadership. If you're joining us tonight and you're active on social media, we encourage you to follow the conversation on Twitter using the hashtag GirlsLead. You can also join us on Facebook at facebook.com/NEA Today. Also, we encourage everyone to visit our website, nea.org/women, for lots of useful information and the report that we're going to be discussing tonight. Also, this evening is part of the global initiative of Education International, the Global Union Federation, where they're looking to address inequities in education across international boundaries. We have a short video presentation for their Unite for Quality Education campaign. Let's take a look before we meet our guest.
Education for all!
See how far we've come. Since 2000, the number of children out of school has dropped nearly in half. 50 million more children have been given a chance at education, a chance that may never have come without a concerted global effort. But that also means tens of millions of students aren't in school. More generations left behind. Their nations denied participation in the prosperity that comes with an educated populace. Their families denied a chance at the better health and nutrition outcomes that come with each year of completed schooling. And they themselves denied the full value of citizenship. Right now, today, an impoverished girl in a low-income country has almost no chance of going to school. In fact, her great-granddaughter will be the first female in her family to complete lower secondary school. We can break the cycle. We know what to do. We know what works. But face it, we're educators. Since when did knowing what works automatically carry the day in the policies of this profession? So we do what we need to do for the success of our students, for the well-being of their families and the development of our communities. Organize, we mobilize, we unite for quality education. More than 30 million educators from 172 countries represented by Education International have mounted an unprecedented campaign: quality teaching, quality tools and resources, and quality environments for teaching and learning. We know our history. 65 years ago, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights said, "Education shall be directed to the full development of the human personality and to the strengthening of respect for human rights and fundamental freedoms." We know our math. 1/4 of the youth population cannot read all or part of a sentence. In a third of countries analyzed, less than 3/4 of existing primary school teachers are trained to national standards. We know our civics. Governments globally are not meeting their funding commitments to education or teacher training and support. We know our politics. Too often, it's blame the educators. But facts are very stubborn. Quality education for all requires investments in quality teaching through training, continuous professional development, decent salaries, and the tools and environments to facilitate teaching and learning. Now, current events. The UN is deciding whether quality education is a critical development goal, whether we will not only put children in school, but provide them the quality education we all need them to have. The Unite for Quality Education campaign is recognized as the voice of the world's educators in these key decisions. More than 100 nations will see events led by educator unions this year to send messages to the United Nations. Quality education is a human right for all, not a privilege for the few. In October, we deliver those messages to the United Nations. Will Education International be delivering thousands, tens of thousands, or millions of messages from educators? That's up to you. Are you in? Is your organization in? To find out, To get involved, to make a difference, stay tuned. Or start by clicking into Unite, the number 4, education.org.
Our first speaker this evening is Lily Eskelsen García, President of the National Education Association. The first female president in over 25 years and the second Hispanic president, she is a powerful, sought-after leader and speaker. A former Utah State Teacher of the Year, Ms. Eskelsen García is a vocal advocate for equity in education. Only just recently, she returned from the United Nations, New York, where she served on a panel sponsored by Education International. There, she addressed the importance of providing equitable education to all students with empowered and well-prepared teachers. Lily?
Participants. This event is part of Education International's Unite for Quality Education campaign, one of 172 events in countries around the world focusing attention on the need to provide opportunities for all children to get an education. Last week, I was at the United Nations with Education International. It was a powerful experience being in New York as the top leaders of each nation gathered to focus on the global road ahead. NEA, with our Education International colleagues representing education unions around the world, we are focused on quality public education as an essential in development. Gender equality is a big issue globally. In too many countries, girls don't even have the most basic opportunities in education. In Benin, West Africa, 60% of rich boys stay in school after the primary years, compared to just 6% of poor girls. Here in the U.S., our girls do well academically compared to most nations. Most college students today are women. But when they get out into the real world, there's still a gender gap in leadership positions. As educators, our mission is not just to help our students do well on tests or in class. Our mission is to help them succeed in the world, whatever their dreams. So we ask ourselves, what can we do as educators to help close the gender leadership gap? Last year, we began working on a survey with the American Association of University Women and the Center of Information and Research on Civic Learning and Engagement, CIRCLE, at Tufts University. The survey looked at our members' attitudes towards girls and leadership. Kay Kawashima Ginsburg of CIRCLE will have more to say about that. We need to think about what we can do as educators to help girls make the leap from being students to being great leaders in society and in business. As educators, we're in a position to create a pipeline of girls interested in leadership and to nurture their dreams. One of the most important things is to be aware of stereotypes, even ones that might seem harmless, and help free girls and boys from these restraints. That means telling all our students that there's a place for girls and women in leadership, just as there is for boys and men. We can be good role models, strong and decisive. From the United Nations, here is Emma Watson. Some of us know her better as Hermione, and she's going to talk about her experiences as a young woman.
I started questioning gender-based assumptions a long time ago. When I was 8, I was confused being called bossy because I wanted to direct the plays that we would put on for our parents, but the boys were not. When at 14, I started to be sexualized by certain elements of the media. When at 15, my girlfriends started dropping out of their beloved sports teams because they didn't want to appear muscly. When at 18, my male friends were unable to express their feelings. I decided that I was a feminist.
Thank you, Lily, and we appreciate that message from Emma Watson. Joining us next via the World Wide Web, first will be Dr. Kay Kawashima Ginsburg, followed by NEA member and educator Jill Showman. Kawashima Ginsburg is Deputy Director for Circle at Tufts University, where she oversees research projects and resources. Her interests include providing resources that help increase civic and political engagement opportunities for youth of diverse backgrounds. Jill Shulman is an English teacher from Wasilla High School and a trainer for NEA's Women's Leadership Training Program. A classroom teacher for over 18 years, she has taught English, English as a second language, and Russian in schools throughout South Central Alaska. Let's start with Dr. Kawashima Ginsburg.
Thank you so much for having me. It's so exciting to be here and great, and so excited to hear from everybody else. So I'm going to present the study findings, but I'm going to talk a little bit about why we thought it was important at Circle at Tisch College at Tufts University and NEA and AAUW. We all know too well that the United States suffers from a serious gender-based leadership gap, which we see in key sectors. Women who are in leadership positions have proven themselves repeatedly, and yet the gap persists. When we look to research, though, it's clear that the leadership gap doesn't just appear overnight when they get to college, but rather it builds gradually as boys and girls go through the primary school years, that is K through 12 education. And by the time they get to college, the confidence in leadership gap is quite large. We at Tisch College at Tufts University and NEA share a conviction that educators have a vast potential to change the status quo by affecting the leadership pipeline, leadership development of students, and by shaping the students' perceptions of gender roles and leadership. School also offers opportunities for leadership to students more than any other setting. So together, we believe that educators have the power to improve our democracy. We collaborated on this study to promote awareness about the gender gap in leadership and to make recommendations about the actions educators and advocates can take. This study involved almost 1,000 NEA members working in middle and high schools in the United States. It explored educators' perspectives on how leadership is defined, who they see leading in different contexts, and the effect of gender on educators' view of student leaders. I'm talking mainly and 3 recommendations, but a lot more details presented in the report. First, we found. I'm sorry? Oh, I'm sorry. We found that educators use a largely egalitarian definition of leadership, naming gender-neutral terms like problem solver, collaborative, and intelligent, which are hopefully shown in the green in the image. I'm not seeing the slides, but hopefully you're seeing that, as key attributes. This is very important because educators are in a position to share their gender-neutral view of leadership with boys and girls. We also found that the training experience in gender and diversity issues was key in reducing the gender leadership. However, educators see a different reality. They observe boys and girls dominating in different settings and in stereotypical ways. For example, girls tend to lead in English and language communities and arts and culture clubs. On the other hand, more boys take leadership in math class and athletics. Finally, we conducted an experiment where the educators read a candidate statement from a student who was running for student council president and named the strengths and weaknesses of the candidate that they read about. Now, they didn't know this, but all the respondents read exactly the same statement, except for one thing. Half the sample was randomly assigned to read a statement by a girl named Emily, and the other half read the statement by a boy named Jacob. We assumed that if there is no gender bias, educators would give the same assessment of the candidates, regardless of the gender of the statement. If this is not the case, meaning that the gender predicts how the candidate is described, then we would assume that educators held still some implicit bias. On one hand, what we found was that candidates were described in similar ways. They used terms like determined, driven, and ambitious and popular to describe these candidates. But on the other hand, we also found a subtle but consistent pattern of difference that suggested implicit bias. A boy candidate received more descriptions that are considered male stereotypes, such as aggressive, confident, and arrogant, while our girl candidate was more likely to be described as bubbly, compassionate, hardworking, but also that she lacked authority and relevant experience. These findings suggest that even deeply committed educators who define leaders in a gender-neutral term may hold gender stereotypes, and these unconscious biases may influence behaviors. Unless we actively address them, it would be difficult to change the status quo. Based on the research findings, we made 3 recommendations. First, high-quality professional development and pre-service trainings on cultural competence, diversity, and leadership that challenge stereotypes, bias, women, and leadership should be made available to all educators. And second, the importance of women's contributions should be highlighted so that both boys and girls understand that gender does not define leadership or accomplishment. And finally, educators should encourage girls to take on leadership roles and support all students who take non-traditional leadership roles, that's boys and girls. We hope this survey and report are just the beginning of a collaborative process that explores the role that educators can play in closing leadership gap and improving the pipeline. We strongly believe that educators are positioned to lead the way and look forward to future collaboration. Thank you.
To raise their own voices. How can we honor girls' voices and experiences, allowing them to lead? Joining us to talk about what educators, education unions, and students are doing to support and uplift their voices are Madeline Kennedy McFoy and Noah Gowari. Madeline is a program officer for Education International, working with the Human Trade Union and Equality Unit, where she focuses her work on gender equity issues. Noah is a high school senior and co-president of her high school's Girls Unite Club. She coordinates fundraising efforts for her school's scholarship program, which benefits girls in rural Mali. She speaks French, Russian, and Arabic. Let's start with Madeline. Madeline? Okay, we're going to come back to Madeline in just a few minutes, but since we have Noah here in the studio, we're going to go ahead from Noah. Good evening, Noah.
Good evening. Thank you for the lovely introduction. I do co-lead the organization Schoolgirls Unite at my high school with a friend, Diana Halikias, and a really dynamic, wonderful group of motivated young women. SGU, our Schoolgirls Unite, is very unique for the extent of leadership opportunity that it affords young girls. It's precisely an example of the kind of purpose-driven, social change-oriented leadership that Ms. Kawashima Ginsburg references in her study. Usually clubs like ours are relegated to the bake sale fundraiser category of activism, but we're coordinating an entire scholarship program for 56 girls and also are very involved in local activism initiatives like International Day of the Girl and events run by the Global Campaign for Education, who work closely with us. We're participating in their Box Out the Barriers event this year, which I highly recommend that you look up and get involved with at your own schools if you can. It's a wonderful program. I'm the liaison as well to our Malian sister organization, Fusuni. So that entails my communicating directly with girls' education leaders in Mali. On our most recent Skype, we talked about, for example, harassment issues at these schools in rural Mali. The girls aren't comfortable talking about issues with their education, issues with their relationship with their teachers, if the male principal is present in the room. And I think that that illustrates the way that gender barriers change depending on location. I mean, the barriers to a girl's education in Mali are infinitely compounded compared to the ones that I face here. But by working to help girls get access to an education, I and other members of Schoolgirls Unite develop crucial leadership skills and that these girls face. Our sister organization, Fusuni, serves as our eyes and ears on the ground. So they share with us via Facebook and Skype the information that we need. And once a year, we're able to go to lobby the US Congress with the information that we have on behalf of the Global Campaign for Education. So we got to speak one-on-one with Congressman Chris Van Hollen about the Global Campaign for Education and girls' education in general, and he agreed to sign a pledge to increase American donations to the Global Partnership for Education. Schoolgirls Unite has been incredibly empowering for me, but it's not a unique initiative. It's not the kind of thing that can only happen at my school. Girls are excited about helping girls. Young people are excited about helping young people. And there's plenty of initiatives like it, Day of the Girl being one of them, that people can very easily get involved with. I really encourage educators and students to link up via social media with other young change makers. It's too easy, and it helps to develop in them the confidence, the communication skills, and the desire to help other people that they need to be active leaders in this world.
Thank you, Noah. I'm going to have some questions for you in just a few minutes, but I think that we actually have Jill on the line. And so we're going to toss to Jill very quickly. Jill, can you hear us?
In each community,
so I do actually want to go back to Noah since we have this opportunity. Noah, as an we have several educators that are out here watching with us. What can they do? And I know you said that they can go to social media, whatever, but if they wanted to start a chapter in their school, if they wanted to get girls involved immediately, what are some of the steps they can take?
Well, there's a few different initiatives. Schoolgirls Unite has a website, www.schoolgirlsunite.org, where we link to a few other similar programs. One of them is fantastic. It's called Girl Up with the UN Foundation. And they actually have a starter on their website, the Girl Up UN Foundation website, to start a chapter at your school. So does Day of the Girl. Movies, documentaries like Raising Miss President, which is sort of about what we're talking about today in terms of girl leadership and inspiring girls to be leaders. That documentary has a starter kit about doing a screening and starting discussions. Just encourage identifying girls who might be interested and encouraging them to talk to friends is really key, I think. And that's how I got involved. A friend just dragged me along.
Okay, and what's the website? So you named two. Give them one more time.
Okay, so the website for my organization is www.schoolgirlsunite.org. And then you can also Google Girl Up with the UN Foundation. And there's a wonderful documentary out perfectly relevant to what we're talking about today called Raising Miss President, which we're actually screening in honor of International Day of the Girl, which is the fourth thing that you guys should look up if you get a chance.
Thank you, Noah. And to, I guess, piggyback on what Noah's been talking about in terms of our international efforts, I do believe we have Madeline now. So let's try and connect with Madeline. Madeline, can you hear us, and can we hear you?
Okay, I'll try that again. Thank you. I was kind of talking a little bit about the Unite campaign that we've been running for the last 12 months, Education International, our members of the world. I was saying that actually that campaign has been an unprecedented demonstration of the capacity that the organization has to bring so many people together, have one voice, really from the bottom up. And by this we mean that the definition of quality education that EI is advocating for is one that's really grounded in the everyday interactions that teachers and educators have with students in their classrooms and the other different locations of teaching and learning. So at EI, we really emphasize the fact that if you're talking about quality education, then by definition, that education has got to be equitable. And when we're talking about equity, we're not just referring to equitable access, but also equitable content that's free from stereotypes that Lenny mentioned earlier, and delivered through ways of teaching that promote the human rights and dignity of every single student, and also contributes towards creating just and equal society. My members would be the first to point out the kind of strategic role that teachers can play in promoting gender equity through their teaching practice. By the same token, they would also emphasize that a teacher's duty is not just to facilitate a student's learning, but also to create a space for that student to be able to put what they've learned into practice. And this approach, I think, is really key when we come to thinking about the role that teachers and educators can play in fostering girls' leadership. Education is obviously a powerful tool for empowerment. Teachers are better placed than most to foster girls' empowerment. I think that as a global federation of teachers organizations, one of EI's biggest strengths is the fact that we're able to speak to and also to try and influence policymakers at the highest level. And when we're making our demands for quality education for all, we should also be able to be making the point that the provision of quality education has got to be accompanied by measures that secure legal rights and social status of all citizens. In other words, teachers' efforts to enable girls to practice and experience leadership while they're at school is not going to translate into real, life-changing and lifelong empowerment if nothing is done to address the structural inequalities in our societies. Jessica Carter is a young Australian blogger, and she argued a little while ago that for girls, she said, there is more to empowerment than education. In an online article, she asked these questions. She said, even if we manage to provide it gives a girl the skills and opportunities that she needs for an empowered existence, where will she use those skills? How will she seize these opportunities if society doesn't recognize her empowerment? If, after she graduates, she can't get a job where she can use her knowledge, if she can't earn a fair wage for what she does, if she can't choose marriage and raise a family on her own terms, has education really empowered her? So I think that this is really where EI can be most effective. Driving home the message that quality education for all, it can't stand alone. If governments are serious about empowering girls, be serious about promoting and protecting women's rights. There's a kind of relationship of mutual enforcement between women's rights on one hand and the empowerment of girls. You can't have one without the other. And when you have one, the other stands to follow. So I think we could say that society is a tree that bears fruit in future generations. If society continues to be structurally unequal, the tree will only bear the wrong fruit that's overwhelmingly picked by girls all over the world, including lack of access to education, unequal participation within education, sexual and other violence on the way to and from and even at school, among other things. When the United Nations will come next year, in September 2015, to their final negotiations for a new sustainable development framework, Education International can certainly take the lead in making sure that governments meet their obligation to provide quality education for all. But we can also play a very important role with our partners and with our allies in pushing for sustainable development that thoroughly mainstream gender equality and girls' and women's rights throughout the whole framework. We'll be joining with our partners to call for human rights to be at the core of the framework. And the importance of gender equality for it to be mainstream throughout all the goals also has an impact on the status and the leadership of women teachers. And we know the evidence shows that in many countries, women teachers are looked up to by girls at school. In fact, the presence of women teachers in leadership roles plays a big influence on the extent to which girls are able to participate and really fulfill their potential at school. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Madeline. So now we've heard about the programs, we've heard about how to implement. So we know that the key to establishing a good program is understanding what's working and what's not. We'd like to take just a few moments to explore what are some promising practices here in the U.S. and beyond. Joining us here in the studio is Corey Hamilton. Corey is a Senior Education Equity Specialist for the Mid-Atlantic Equity Consortium, a former classroom teacher. She coordinates efforts to provide universal technical assistance to families, educators, and practitioners. We'll also be joined via the web by Joanna Jaro Ostron, a Swedish social science teacher and executive board member of the Swedish Education Union. To set the stage for their talks, we have a quick video from Sweden entitled, "It All Starts with a Good Teacher." Welcome, Corey.
Thank you for that wonderful introduction. I think that it's very clear that Noah is the kind of student that we should be looking for in our schools when it comes to women and girls leadership. Absolutely. Because this vibrance and personality and excitement is something that I think is absolutely contagious. Yes. And as long as we're having these kinds of conversations, we need this kind of fire in the room for sure. As you stated, I'm part of the Mid-Atlantic Equity Consortium and the Mid-Atlantic Equity Assistance Center. There are 10 Equity Assistance Centers in the United States that are funded by the Department of Education. And our charge is to promote civil rights. And in that umbrella of promoting civil rights are addressing issues of gender equity. We put together a brief one-pager for educators of 10 things that you should focus on when you're discussing and engaging with gender equity issues, particularly supporting young ladies and girls. But it's really about addressing mindsets and, as stated multiple times before, biases that we have that are unconscious much of the time. And so I'd like to highlight just a couple because they're related to each other and they're related to other things that were brought up earlier. But we have to begin early to nurture the freedom from stereotype expectations. We have perceptions as to what girls are supposed to do, and slowly we are breaking down some of those barriers. But as educators, we need to make sure that we are engaging with students in a way that we're not unconsciously affirming the stereotypes of what we think girls should be doing. We also need to be aware of the messages that girls receive about their worth and place in our culture and within our schools. We like to create an environment that is active and engaging in the classroom, and we need to be very conscientious of the kinds of assignments and tasks that we're asking students to participate in when we're having them to support their learning and the learning of their peers. So if you're having a person who's a paper passer-outer, for example, I don't know if that's actually a word, but for these purposes it will be. We want to make sure that it's not always a girl who's standing up and distributing the papers in reinforcing that idea that she should be serving other people. We want to disperse those kinds of activities so that it's something that everybody should engage in and not just affirming that that's something that girls do. Encourage girls to participate in all academic courses, particularly STEM courses. I was an AP English teacher, and I had a classroom of 42 students in South Los Angeles, and 38 of them were girls. And that was wonderful and alarming at the same time, because when you go across the hall to the AP biology class, the majority of the students who were in that room were boys. And so that says something, again, about those stereotypes and those assumptions that are being made about what girls' skills are. We also need to be conscientious of the messages that we are sending girls based on our classroom interactions with them. Going back to some of the activities that we engage with them, we have to be aware as educators of the kinds of subtle cues that we are giving girls in classrooms. And lastly, we need to really support girls in exploring their passions and the things that they are excited about. Like Noah, she seems very excited about connecting girls with other girls. So if I had a student like her in my classroom, I would encourage that, and I would figure out a way to engage her with that as actively as possible to spread that fire around the school.
Those are all wonderful and fabulous ideas. I think that we definitely need to hear more about that. Right now we're going to go to Joanna. Joanna.
Thank you, and thank you very much for inviting me. I'm very happy to be a part of this discussion. For us to succeed in improving gender equity, it is crucial that we take all opportunity to learn from each other's experiences. In summary, the Swedish school system has always striven to balance differences between groups. In the beginning, focus was on class. In the last few decades, of the 20th century, focus shifted to gender. Since then, a gender-conscious attitude has been growing among teachers and school leaders. By challenging gender stereotypes, it is possible to encourage girls to take the role of leaders and boys to expand their ways of being boys. In recent years, a lot of successful work done on gender equity in Swedish classrooms is based on non-normative pedagogy. Lärarförbundet is very active in promoting this approach. In non-normative pedagogy, focus is on making the norms that govern our ideas and values visible and questioning our norms. In the recent decades, some schools and municipalities appointed certain gender educators. They received training in gender-conscious pedagogy to support their teacher colleagues and initiate work in their schools. Also, I would like to especially highlight the role of early childhood education. In Sweden, we are very proud of our early childhood education, which is attended by 94% of Swedish 3 to 5-year-olds. We believe that it is important to start challenging gender stereotypes from early childhood. Actually, the teachers in early childhood education are pioneers in gender-conscious pedagogy. There are many schools in early childhood education where innovative work with, for example, language and play is done in a very structured and systematic way. In primary, secondary, and upper secondary schools, many teachers work to challenge traditional gender stereotypes in day-to-day classroom work. Examples of current issues and challenges in Sweden are that boys underachieve in school and girls experience more stress. Boys and girls make gender stereotypic choices of course and program in upper secondary school. Now, I am very proud to also highlight Lärarförbundet national work. Our development cooperation is about organizational development, and it is always developed from our partners' priorities. Gender is an integrated part and a priority issue in all programs, as it is a key for development. Apart from bilateral work, Lärarförbundet also supports the EI gender networks in Latin America, in Africa, in Arab-speaking countries, in India and the Philippines. We can see a lot of results from the work so far, and women are stepping forward to take on leadership positions to much higher extent. We have identified a few key areas to focus on, which, by the way, are also important lessons for our own organization. First, we need to know where we start, and for that we need facts and statistics on the gender distribution of the membership and how it is reflected in the leadership. Secondly, we need to look at the organization's constitution and start discussing measures like quotas to guarantee representativeness of both women and men in the structures. There is always a risk that the quota becomes a glass ceiling, but it is sometimes a good tool to get the women into the discussion. Third point, gender equity must be the responsibility for both women and men. Mainstreaming gender issues is effective, but at some phase of development, elected gender coordinators can be an important strategy. My fourth point is capacity building in gender issues. It is important to get training on structures in gender issues, to be aware of the structural discrimination and not to see this only as an individual problem. Finally, it is important to look at the practical arrangements for involving women and reflect on how meetings are arranged. If the venues chosen are safe places, for example, it seems to be easier to meet in the morning instead of in the evening for many women. The burning issue is it the women who's going to change or is it the union? if we are striving for true gender equity. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Joanna. I'm so grateful that we've had the opportunity to include that very important voice in our conversation. We want to go one more time to Wasilla, Alaska, where Jill Showman will talk about how educators can help girls lead. Jill, are you with us?
And hopefully you can hear me. My name is Jill Showman. I am an 18-year teaching veteran and a proud NEA member. I moved to Alaska from Iowa in 1997 to teach Russian, and I've had a great opportunity to work and live in a variety of communities throughout the state. Each community is a bit different due to their language and culture, and the information I'm presenting today is based on my most recent experiences in Wasilla. Wasilla is just north of Anchorage, about 50 miles. We are considered to be urban or even suburban in terms of Alaska. In my school district, the district is the geographical size of West Virginia. It is geographically and culturally diverse, and we currently have 52.9% of our population as boys and 47.1% as girls, and that's kindergarten through 12th grade. At my school, at Wasilla High School, I teach English currently and yearbook. And we've got 1,177 students. 55.56% of those are boys, and 44.44% are girls. One of the things to note that Alaska is a little bit different. We're not as traditional as the lower 48. Girls are taught to be independent and self-sufficient, such as there's a subsistence lifestyle where they fish and hunt. They put meat and fish in their freezers due to the need to. Maybe not so much in the more urban areas of Wasilla, Anchorage, Juneau, but especially out in the villages, subsistence lifestyle is very important. They have to deal with extreme weather conditions, especially when driving, since we don't have many public transportation options. So girls are driving. They're bringing themselves to and from school as well as the larger cities. And independence is fostered at home and the community because of safety concerns. I would say that, like in the report, we have more than 30% currently in terms of our educational leadership. Currently, we have 24 female principals and 20 male principals in our school district. This bucks the tradition just a little bit, but there are more traditional communities, like I said, the rural communities, and there are smaller pockets of geographical and cultural communities that are very much more traditional. We are fairly diverse. We've got Hmong students that have moved up to Alaska, and although it varies from family to family, girls marry very young, perhaps 14 to 16. They may have children and still attend school. We have Russian Old Believers, and they are very staunch in their tradition, although they're changing somewhat over the past decade. They also marry young. In one of the previous schools that I worked at on the Kenai Peninsula, one of the girls actually married, she was 14. She got married to an older man from another country, and although it wasn't acceptable that girls took leadership positions, we tried to promote leadership down there, especially to keep the girls in school, to keep them active. One of the things that we did is try to get them active in sports. But the Russian Old Believers, like I said, although they're changing somewhat over the past decade, they still marry quite young. They don't necessarily finish high school or go on to higher ed. Then we also have another pocket of a culture, the Russian-Ukrainian Pentecostal, that also is not necessarily culturally accepted that females attain a leadership position. it varies from family to family. And in the past 10 years, being up here in Wasilla, I've noticed that many of the families are more accepting that the girls become leaders. Previously, when I was teaching bilingual and Russian here at Wasilla High School, I urged my female students to get involved in various activities. Several were actively involved in our student government, got involved in the school district student advisory board, where they help make traditions and policy changes for students throughout the district. There was one of my students I was very proud of as well. She moved here when she was, I believe, in 7th grade, and was active at the state level, involved in making policies for students. So that is a great honor for her and her family. And like I said, that's changed over the past decade since I've moved to Wasilla. We do also have students that come in from rural villages. So Wasilla is a hub. Anchorage has about 300,000 people that live in it, and that's about half the state's population. When we're talking about rural villages, students, there are no roads to those villages. They have to fly. Sometimes they, in the wintertime, they're able to snow machine across the frozen rivers from village to village. In the summertime, in the spring, they're able to skiff or take a boat from village to village. That's their transportation. So when they come into a larger town, even like Wasilla, and going to Wasilla High School, that has almost 1,200 students, they can get a lot of them can get shell-shocked. They notice cultural differences. It's a Caucasian community rather than native. They get lost in the school system. They may come from a small school. For example, another village that I worked in previously, in our kindergarten through 12th grade, we had 75 students. I was the lone high school teacher, so I taught anything from Algebra 1 and Algebra 2, history, English, Russian, chemistry. I'm not a good mix with chemistry, but I was the high school teacher, and so in a smaller school like that, it's very important to make sure that the culture and the community is very very important in that small community, in that small school. It's not necessarily the same way at Wasilla High, so they can get lost. So one of the things that we've tried to do as a district and then in our school is promote a program called ANSEP. It's the Alaska Native Science and Engineering Program, where we promote girls in the program to girls, both at the middle school and the high school level, so that they get proficient in science and math. That's where we're falling short. First of all, in our advanced placement, our AP classes, calculus, for example, we have a lower number of students in there, as well as advanced placement chemistry. And we've been looking at as staff, how can we better promote those classes? Most of our students take advanced placement language arts or literature. Our female students do, but like I said, there's lower numbers with our science and math. So implementing, just as previous speakers stated, STEM programs where science, technology, engineering, math, as well as science, technology, engineering, arts and math, STEAM, have been implemented at our elementary schools. We hope that perhaps that will allow more girls to get into those higher level classes when they get into the high school level, and we'll continue to watch them as they get into those secondary schools. One of the other things that we've got up here in Alaska, we promote more traditional clubs and activities to girls, such as Skills USA, which is a business-based group, car club, or auto classes. Once again, because the girls are a little more self-sufficient, if their car breaks down on the side of the highway and they're by Willow, 50 miles north of Wasilla, they're not going to be able to get a tow truck. So knowing what to do and how to fix their cars is pretty instrumental, especially when you're talking about weather concerns such as a blizzard. By the way, we're supposed to get snow up here on Saturday, so that's early even for us. We are trying to get more female students involved, like I said, in our student advisory board, which is district-wide, National Honor Society, and Business Professionals of America, and then keep promoting. One of the best things that I've noticed at my high school is that we have many female teachers that play non-traditional sports. We have 3 staff members that are hockey players, female hockey league in the community, and many of our girls will see that, and they'll see their teachers playing hockey in the evenings and the weekends. We do also have some female coaches in male-dominated sport. One of our nurse actually was an assistant hockey coach for many years at the school. And we normally have about 5 girls on the wrestling team. Last year we had 1 football team, but because of that prevalence, like I said, the female teachers playing hockey, we have several female starters, and hockey is a co-ed sport up here. In the community, still looking at those sports, many of our Alaskan athletes and Olympians are much more well-known than their male counterparts. Keegan Randall is probably our most well-known Olympic athlete. She's a skier. Has been to the Olympics numerous times, has promoted skiing very well. Holly Brooks is also a skier. Pam Dreyer, a hockey player. Rosie Fletcher, snowboarder. And then, of course, we have several women mushers that have done the Iditarod, so girls get to see female athletes in motion when Susan Butcher or Dee Dee John Rowe or Libby Riddles have raced in the Iditarod, or they can watch videos or read books about each one of those mushers. It's, like I said, Alaska's a little bit different. We certainly do not have the 50-50 split. We're still far behind in terms of reaching the same leadership numbers that men do, but I believe that continuing to promote courses, ANSEP programs, encouraging girls to get more active and involved in leadership, and just making sure that words of leadership in the classroom and in the community really will help our girls find their capabilities.
Thank you so much, Jill. I think it was so vital that we include the voice of the classroom teacher, and so I'm so thankful we were able to get you to join us. We've had a couple of questions come to us from people that might be viewing out in the area, and also from Twitter. So I'd like to give this first question to Madeline. Madeline, if you will, here's the question. And it comes from Mary B. from Grand Rapids, Michigan, and she asks, how can we take the best practices from other countries and use those to foster international leadership for girls?
Question to me, because I didn't hear it clearly. I'm sorry. Could you repeat it?
Please repeat the question.
Okay, repeat the question.
Hi. Could you repeat the question to me?
Yeah. How can we take the best practices from other countries and use them to foster international leadership for girls?
I'm sorry, it's still not coming through.
Hello? Okay, I'm going to
get it one more time. How can we take the best practices from other countries and use them to foster international leadership for girls?
I think I heard something like, how can we take best practices from other countries and get them across regions? Something like that? Okay. Thank you. Sorry about that. Okay. Well, certainly at Education International, as well as organizing ourselves and trying to have an impact at the global level, we do work regionally as well. And we're very, very keen to try to get the different regions to speak to each other. And within the different regions, also people speak to each other. So we do try to facilitate the exchange of information, translating some of those, collecting first of all some of those best practices, and then translating them into different languages, because yes, English is a global language, and people are going to be able to engage and take ownership of something better if it's in a language that's their own, and that they can play with programs and different types of initiatives. Then having it in your mother tongue is much more useful, I would say. So we try to facilitate cross-regional dissemination and exchange of information and best practices. Okay.
It came from @DonnaBelieves, and she asked, and I think this question would best be answered by Kay. I believe that there's some comments in the report that might be most helpful. @DonnaBelieves asked, how do we lift up and support the unique strengths of female leaders, empathy, nurturing, etc., without eradicating them? Kay?
Female leadership, whether it's sort of stereotypically female or not. Is that sort of the question? I heard it was something about without eradicating. Okay. Yeah, so I think this really goes to some of the message that I'm hearing all along, which is that we really have to accept all sorts of leadership for both boys and girls. In that, you know, boys can be any way they want as leaders, and so are girls. So if they want to have both very stereotypically or traditionally female characteristics as leaders, like compassion or sympathy, that's fine. But I think it's really that the society has to change in viewing these leaders and not have them viewed as somebody that's strange or weird and therefore somehow excluded from the top leadership position. So I think we all need to make this sort of step forward together, not just girls moving forward, but the guys and the policy and the education all together.
I think we have one more question. This comes from Bernadette in South Carolina, and Lily, I'd like to give this one to you. Bernadette asked, how do we balance student increased participation in activities to develop leadership qualities with what seems to be an increased need for students to work in order to financially assist their families?
Wow. I don't see those as mutually exclusive. Leadership isn't like a class that you take. Leadership is how you live. It's how you breathe. And so I think what we have to do is think about leadership for girls as something in a classroom that is just organic. It's just natural. As you were saying about when you're divvying up the chores, it's not like the boys are going to move the furniture and the girls are going to, you know, pass out the papers or wash the tables or whatever it is, where you're kind of thinking, come on, girls, you can move the furniture too. Guys, you pass out the paper. When you're modeling it, when you're showing role models, all of that counts. So what we have to do is incorporate, not separate.
Definitely. I want to, Lily, go ahead and give you closing remarks before we end for today. I want to also encourage everyone that we will continue to try to answer your questions via Twitter, also via email. All of our experts have been willing to answer your questions, and we'll get those back to you. But Lily, can you give us some quick closing remarks?
I want to thank Michelle for moderating for us, yay. And all of the amazing folks here in the studio that took the time, those of you that are out there land, and of course all of you that took the time to be here and to listen in, and all of those future people who are going to be able to access this on our website. You're going to want to go to NEA.org/women, because you'll find this, you'll find the videos that we had, and you'll find the report itself. Pass it around, put it on your own Facebook page so that people can take advantage of this amazing information. And thank you all for the honor of being here today. And with that, we'll sign off.
Thank you all for joining us. It's been my honor, my privilege. I would definitely encourage everyone to continue the conversation, share what you've heard today, and continue to follow the conversation on Twitter, #GirlsLead and NEA.org/women. Thank you and good night.
I was not put on this earth to be invisible.
I was not put on this earth to be invisible.
I was not born to be denied.
To be denied.
我生来不是要被人否定。
I was not given life only to belong to someone else.
Only to belong to someone else.
I belong to me.
To me.
I belong to me.
I have a voice.
I have a voice.
I have a voice.
I have a voice and I will use it.
And I will use it.
I have dreams unforgettable.
I have a name.
I have a name.
I have a name. And it is not anonymous.
It is not anonymous.
Or insignificant.
Or insignifiant.
Or unworthy. Or waiting anymore to be called.
Someday they will say, this was the moment when the world got out of my way.
When the world got out of my way.
This was the moment I was allowed to be astonishing.
Astonishing.
To be astonishing.
To be astonishing.
This is the moment when my rising no longer scares you.
C'est le moment où mon ascension ne vous fait plus peur.
This is the moment when being a girl became my strength.
Became my strength.
My strength.
My strength.
My strength.
Not my pain.
Not my pain.
And not my pain.
This is the moment.
This is the moment when the world sees
That although I'm held back by every problem,
I am the key.
I am the key.
I am the key to all solutions.
I am the key to a solution.
This is a moment when a girl
and a girl.
and a girl
And a girl.
and a girl
And a girl.
And a girl.
and 250 million other girls.
250 million.
250 million.
250 million other girls.
250 million other girls.
Say with voices loud.
Say with voices
Say
loud.
with voices loud.
Say with voices
Dilo
loud.
en voz alta.
都在高声呐喊。
Say with voices loud.
Say with voices loud.
That this is our moment.
Porque este es nuestro momento.
That this is our moment.
This is my moment.
This is my moment.
This is my moment.
This is my moment.
This. Yes, this is the moment.